Hi Steve, lovely to meet up with you and do some further work on your game over at the studio yesterday. The session was based around maintaining your inclination to the ground when viewed from face on. What we saw at the start of your session was a situation where the head lifted quite a lot and very early during the backswing. As a result, you can see that your inclination to the ground, highlighted with a red line, is lost quite dramatically early in the piece. Now the problem we've got from there now is if we stay there, we have to expand the radius of the swing in order to make contact with the ball, which means the wrist angles get dumped quite dramatically coming to impact. Our other alternative is to sort of flex forward quite dramatically in the downswing, and you can see there that the head's bobbing up and down, and whenever the head's bobbing up and down and the wrists are uncocking fast, that's not really a recipe for striking the golf ball consistently. So at the top of the backswing, we've lost our inclination to the ground, and we started to put sort of, various lines on there. We talked about sort of insufficient side bending in the hips, the fact that the shoulders are no longer turning at 90 degrees to our original inclination to the ground, and there was very little difference between the left and the right knee. When we view it from face on, the other thing we see is that the left shoulder, rather than working down, which is shoulder down is two of the words from our 10-word template, what happens is initially the left shoulder works down, which is why we're sort of centred in the early part of the backswing. Then as that extension kicks in, so as the spine begins to stretch, the left shoulder is not working down sufficiently to offset the act of standing up. So again, you can see here the shoulders are very level, the extension's occurring, but the left tilt isn't offsetting it. And again, we've got a situation here where the hips are turning, but they're turning very level, as can be seen by very little difference between the lead and trail knee. So the first thing we did was get you to hit some shots where you had to maintain your inclination to the ground. So here I am with a club across the head, and the goal here is to just make your normal swing whilst keeping your head against the golf club. And you can see when you do that straight away, there's much more of a difference between the knees. And this was where you started to get the feel. You got the feel in the knees. There's much more side bend in the hips, and the shoulders now are turning on a more tilted angle, and your inclination to the ground is much more consistent. So we put that sort of original line on there for your inclination to the ground at setup. You can see now as you take the club back, the shoulders and the hips are turning on a tilted angle, and it's much more in keeping with the angles that you were establishing at address. When we view this from face on, the same action with a club across the forehead, we see that the left shoulder works down for longer. So the left shoulder working down and across early in the swing is what keeps you centred. Now as you extend to keep centred, the left shoulder must work down to offset the standing up piece, if you will, of the golf swing. So players do extend, there is an elongation of the spine, but it's offset by the left shoulder working down. And the left shoulder can only work down for long enough if the lead leg continues to flex whilst the trail leg is straightening. So there's much more of a differential between the lead and trail leg. There's more pelvic side bend. As a result, the shoulders have travelled much further as well. That's your extension kicking in. The left arm is starting to travel a little bit further. More than anything, you're much more fixed and stable. We then gave you the goal, and obviously, standing over the club across your head is great in a controlled environment, and it gets the point across of how to improve your backswing via improving your inclination. But it's not very productive in the real world, because we're not going to have someone standing there holding the club against your head, etc, etc. So what we need to do is give you an exercise that you can do to facilitate the changes that we want whilst you're out at the driving range. We did mention that as the lesson went on, the handle of the club was getting a little bit too low. You can see here it's pointing below the level of the belt, toe end of the club sticking up in the air. Ideally we want the toe end of the club slightly up and the handle pointing at the belt line. That's one of the reasons in this next piece of footage you're going to see the head excuse me, lift slightly because we are a little bit too crouched at P1 at setup. So just raise the handle back up a little bit just to strike that nice balance between where you were on your first session and where you are now during session 2. But the goal here, we've got the cane threaded through the front 2 belt loops on the trousers, and we're asking you to move the cane down as much as you can during the backswing. Now, we talked about as the left shoulder works down, the shoulder turn starts to kick in. The way the spine works and is designed means that any time we left tilt whilst we're bent over, we also start to introduce some turn. So from here now, the goal is to work the cane down as much as we can. That's creating that flex in the left knee that we're after. As the lead leg flexes, that allows the hips to turn on a tilted angle, allowing the shoulder to trace more of a downward path. And you've got a nice sort of progression there from your original swing at the start of the session, the controlled environment swing, if you will, where I'm holding the club across your forehead, and then the real world swing where we've made a nice steady improvement that we can work on and build on in the coming months. When we do this again, this is you trying to max everything out during the backswing. Work the cane down as much as possible. You can see that there's nowhere near as much lifting of the head. We're going to allow you a little bit of leeway. We did say that, we're not a machine, we're not fixed, but we should be pretty consistent, pretty stable. We can see that we've got some pelvic side bend now because we've got more of a differential between the knees. So your ability to work the left shoulder down is directly affected by what the lead leg and the left knee does and the effect that that has on the hips. You can see that when you do that, your shoulders are turning on a tilted angle at 90 degrees to your original inclination to the ground. Great session. Keep working those changes in. I'll forward the email across with the images and the link to this video a little bit later on today. Good luck with it. Look forward to meeting you up in October and seeing how this has progressed, because I really like what I'm seeing there, particularly on the centre and right hand footage. I think that was a great effort throughout the day, much more consistent with driver. The only addition we made with driver was that we pushed the centre of the hips further forward at setup to make the hip slide piece a little bit easier for you to achieve. Because the ball's further forward in the circle, the hips do have to move forward for longer. But the main mechanics that we want to work in are the left shoulder working down for longer via what the knees are doing during the backswing. Good luck with it. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call. Well done.